So, Mr. Secretary General, so did you come to the Security Council with a plan or with new ideas? Because obviously you went to Libya with some ideas and you shared it with the parties there, and obviously it was not enough for the parties to reach an agreement or to stop the fight.
Our humanitarian colleagues on the ground report that the escalation of violence in and around Tripoli has caused the displacement of some 3,400 people fleeing from fighting and has blocked emergency services from reaching casualties and civilians. Clashes with heavy weapons are affecting residential areas, and an unknown number of civilians are unable to flee.
And the United Nations remain available to facilitate any political solution.
So do you have new ideas you shared with the Council, and how did you find the reaction in the Security Council today?
We're calling for a temporary humanitarian truce to allow for the provision of emergency services and the voluntary passage of civilians, including those wounded, from the areas of conflict.
So do you have new ideas you shared with the Council, and how did you find the reaction in the Security Council today?
It is for the Security Council to speak in relation to what the Security Council decides.
When my girlfriend and I first started reading Aristotle, Plato, Thucydides, major thinkers in the history of political thought, primarily out of Athens, I think a few of them out of Rome and Sparta. Where does Xenophon fall in that? Anyway, we started reading some of these major thinkers in the history of Western political philosophy. One of the things I said to her is, when you look at contemporary politics, when you look at the people who make the decisions, you will be amazed to find that they also read these texts. They also are familiar with these sources. They're familiar with the arguments and ambiguities that are to be found in Plato, Aristotle, Thucydides, so on and so forth. Even somebody who might seem like a kind of lowbrow, despicable career politician, someone like Bill Clinton, to a remarkable extent, recent generations of politicians have had this kind of education, whether they got it formally in elite Ivy League universities or whether they sought it out for themselves. One of the things I find disturbing in surveying both journalistic and professional political opinion about the current events in Libya is that it shows to me the extent to which the people who are now in power and the people who now broadcast the decisions made by those in power, they really have not read Aristotle, Plato, Thucydides. They really do not have that kind of classical learning. I see it reported throughout the mainstream press that the strongman in eastern Libya is supported by Saudi Arabia, as if this is some sort of proof positive that he is not supported by the United States of America, as if Saudi Arabia and the United States of America have not been on the same side of every conflict consistently since George W. Bush. And there was a time, I'm old enough to remember, when Obama first came to office and people wondered, is Obama going to jilt the ongoing military alliance, really worldwide military alliance between Saudi Arabia and the United States? People held their breath, and no, Obama really continued exactly the same policy as George W. Bush. And the world held their breath. People were really uncertain what was going to happen when Donald Trump was first elected. And we had this series of absurd, really absurd statements from Donald Trump, where he said, among other things, that the world looks much different when you're behind the desk at the White House. And he announced that, no, he's just going to carry on having America be Saudi Arabia's #1 mercenary army. So, yes, we know that Haftar in the east is supported by Saudi Arabia. The fact that the eastern Libyan forces are supported by Saudi Arabia does not exclude the possibility that they have been supported by the U.S. in the past, nor that they will be in the future. On the other hand, I see some left-wing and peacenik sources, people who are pro-peace, and I'm not ridiculing them for that, but you'll see why I say this. People who are just general advocates for peace, ridiculing and lambasting this Eastern Libyan force, saying that their leader has been on the payroll of the CIA, or that he is now continuing to be on the payroll of the CIA. The truth is, we don't know that. We don't know. The big news, what we know right now, is that he's backed by France. That's a much harder piece of news for the mainstream media to spin, I suppose. It's not useful propaganda one way or the other. The photographs from this conflict are no longer coming from journalists. They're coming from combatants themselves, because there are no journalists on the ground. As you may have noticed, I just played you some clips from this. Senior officials in the United Nations flew in and flew out and made very florid and bold and vague declarations. Those YouTube videos I just gave you clips from, they have fewer views than the YouTube videos on my own channel. It's shocking to me. So this is major news announcements from Libya on the United Nations' own YouTube channel. And I can say, wow, I get more views than the United Nations on YouTube. Because, look, I can't say nobody cares. I can't say that. But seriously, one of them had 56 views. And I'm two of them, because I clicked on it twice. These are small numbers of people. I can't say that nobody cares. I once had a debate with a professor, university professor in class, where he was talking about the public's lack of interest in Canadian politics in contrast to where interest is focused in American politics. Because there's a lot of interest at the top, shall we say, in American politics, and a lot less interest for local. And I said to him, I said, look, your own premise here, it refutes itself. Your point isn't, this isn't a difference between American politics and Canadian politics. The point is, universally, people pay attention where the decisive difference is made. People are going to look at the stage of political activity, which is actually going to make a difference. And nobody believes that the United Nations can make a difference anymore, and nobody believes that they will make a difference anymore.
But it's still time to stop. It's still time for a ceasefire to take place, for a cessation of hostilities to take place, and to avoid the worst, which would be a dramatic, bloody battle for Tripoli.
We're calling for a temporary humanitarian truce to allow for the provision of emergency services and the voluntary passage of civilians.
So, yes, United Nations can have senior personnel being paid very, very high salaries, wearing very, very well-tailored suits, fly in, fly out, and state a bunch of platitudes about, human rights and reducing the body count and calling for a ceasefire and calling for a political solution. Nobody believes that. And again, the really strange lack of maturity, both coming from the people making those statements and the people reporting them, the people repackaging them into propaganda of various kinds, because it's all propaganda right now. If you present Haftar as a CIA puppet, that's propaganda. We don't know that. We have no indication that his plan or the series of decisions he's made or his army has been in lockstep with U.S. foreign policy. We don't know if he's really been independent, but he's someone who has 20 years experience living in Virginia, who probably has a sense of what's normal in a Western democracy from living for 20 years in Virginia, and that the CIA might now want to co-opt that, might want to build on that good feeling. We do not know about his relationship with Russia. We don't. We know about his relationship with France. We know about his relationship with Saudi Arabia to a limited extent. It seems unlikely that the French are in bed with someone who is a dire enemy of American democracy, but I doubt that the people at the top of the United Nations have a whole lot better information to work with. And what I see is a real lack of the sort of sober, tragic realism that reading Thucydides and Aristotle helps you to cultivate. The future of Libya now is going to be decided by the one who wins by force of arms. Period. And we hope that during his 20 years in Virginia, he developed a taste for elections. We know he received an education from the CIA. We hope that the CIA did not teach him to be a brutal dictator, but that they taught him to value, creating elections of some kinds. I read a passage from Thucydides today in which he said the concept of rights, in the United Nations context, human rights, political rights, rights only exist in relationships between equals. As for the rest, the strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. At the end of World War II, with the whole world taking a step back and looking with shock and awe at the destructive power of the atom bomb, we told ourselves a story. And in 2 words it went, never again. And the reality is, it's only in a very limited set of contexts in which 2 sides are pointing nuclear warheads at each other that fable we all told ourselves, the end of World War II, holds any weight at all. So right now, the map of Libya is being redrawn, and the political destiny of Libya is being defined by the same old-fashioned politics that go back more than 2,500 years to Aristotle and Thucydides. And it's saddening and shocking to me to see that the handful of people who, in totally undemocratic, unaccountable, non-transparent organizations, whether those are in the press, the journalists, or within the United Nations, the people who really earn a good living to do political analysis and provide some meaningful guidance on this. Is it that they don't care, or is it that they simply don't?